The conference room on the third floor of the Fox News headquarters had that particular kind of silence that comes right before something explosive happens. The kind of silence where you can hear the air conditioning hum, where you notice the faint buzz of studio lights, where every breath seems amplified. It was 7:58 p.m. Eastern Time, 2 minutes before the debate would begin broadcasting live to millions of Americans. Dan Bongino sat at the curved desk, his leather folder open in front of him, pages of documentation spread out in precise order. He wasn't nervous. Nervous wasn't something that happened to a man who'd protected presidents in active war zones, who'd stared down threats most people couldn't imagine, who'd spent decades in law enforcement learning that preparation beats panic every single time. His suit was dark, simple, functional. No designer label, no $1,000 tailoring. It was the suit of a man who had work to do, not impressions to make. His expression was calm, focused, the look of someone who'd done their homework and was ready to present their findings. Across from him, Gavin Newsom adjusted his tie for the third time. His hair was immaculate, every strand perfectly placed, catching the studio lights in a way that seemed almost calculated. His suit probably cost more than most Americans' monthly rent. Custom Italian fabric, hand-stitched, the kind of thing you wear when you want people to know you've arrived. He smiled at one of the producers, that practiced politician's smile that never quite reaches the eyes. He'd done hundreds of these appearances. Friendly interviews on CNN where they praised California's progressive policies. Sympathetic segments on MSNBC where hosts nodded along as he explained away failures. This would be easy. Another opportunity to polish his national image, to position himself for higher office, to remind America that California, despite its problems, was still the future. He had no idea what was about to happen. Bret Baier took his position at the moderator's desk, reviewing his notes one final time. He'd moderated dozens of debates, interviewed hundreds of politicians, but something about tonight felt different. The Fox producers had been unusually specific about format. Let them go at it, they'd said. Keep it substantive, but don't interfere unless absolutely necessary. This wasn't going to be a typical moderated debate with timed responses and careful civility. This was going to be a confrontation, and everyone in the building knew it. The production assistant held up 5 fingers. 4, 3, 2, 1. The red light on the main camera illuminated. Across America, millions of people stopped what they were doing. Conservative households where Fox News played constantly. Liberal households tuning in out of curiosity to see Newsom defend California. Independent voters tired of political spin, hoping for something real. The elderly couple in Ohio who'd watched their son move his family from San Diego to Dallas. The small business owner in Pennsylvania who'd lost everything during COVID lockdowns. The police officer in Florida who'd left California after 20 years because crime made the job impossible. They were all watching. Bret Baier's voice was smooth, professional, perfectly calibrated for television. Good evening and welcome to this special Fox News debate event. Tonight, we have California Governor Gavin Newsom and FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino discussing leadership, policy, and America's future. Governor Newsom, you'll have 3 minutes for your opening statement. Newsom leaned forward slightly, his expression earnest, concerned, presidential. His hands moved in those careful politician gestures, emphasizing points without being too aggressive, showing engagement without seeming desperate. Thank you, Bret. It's an honor to be here tonight. I want to talk about California, about what we've accomplished, and about the vision we have for America's future. California is the 5th largest economy in the world. Not in America, in the world. We're larger than the United Kingdom, larger than India. Our state is the engine of American innovation. Silicon Valley, Hollywood, world-class universities, the technology that's changing humanity, it's being created in California. The entertainment that shapes global culture, made in California. The agricultural abundance that feeds America, grown in California. He paused, his expression growing more serious, his voice taking on that tone politicians use when they want you to know they really, really care. We're also leading the nation on the issues that matter most. Climate change. We're not denying it, we're fighting it. Social justice. We're not running from it, we're embracing it. Healthcare. We're expanding access, not restricting it. Education. We're investing in our children's future. Yes, we face challenges. Every large state does. But we face them with progressive values, with compassion, with a commitment to equity and justice. We don't abandon our most vulnerable. We don't ignore science. We don't choose corporate profits over people's lives. California represents a different path for America. A path where diversity is celebrated, where innovation is encouraged, where we tackle big problems with bold solutions. That's the California story. That's the vision I want to share with America tonight. He sat back, satisfied. It had been smooth, polished, exactly the kind of opening that played well on television. Inspirational without being preachy. Defensive of California without seeming desperate. Positioning himself as a national leader without explicitly announcing presidential ambitions. Perfect. Bayer turned to Bongino. Director Bongino, your opening statement. 3 minutes. Dan Bongino didn't move immediately. He let the silence hang for a moment, just long enough for people to notice. Then he looked directly at the camera, not at Bayer, not at Newsom, at the camera, at the millions of Americans watching at home. He spoke slowly, clearly, with the authority of someone who'd spent their entire adult life dealing with facts, evidence, and the consequences of failed policies. Governor Newsom just gave you a very pretty speech. Lots of big words, lots of statistics designed to impress you. California's economy is the 5th largest in the world. Innovation, technology, agriculture, all true, all inherited. He didn't build Silicon Valley. He didn't create Hollywood. He didn't plant California's farms. He inherited the most blessed state in America, with perfect weather, natural resources, ports, universities, and every advantage a government could ask for. And despite all those blessings, people are fleeing California faster than any state in American history. He opened his folder, pulling out a single sheet of paper with migration statistics. Over 500,000 people left California in 3 years. First population decline in state history. These aren't people leaving for retirement. These are families, workers, business owners, people who built California, running away like refugees. They're going to Texas, Florida, Tennessee, Arizona. States with lower taxes, less crime, competent governance. They're running from California like it's on fire, and Governor Newsom wants you to believe that's success. Bongino's voice got harder, more intense, the tone of a prosecutor laying out a case. I've spent my career in law enforcement. NYPD, Secret Service protecting presidents. Now FBI Deputy Director. I know what successful governance looks like. I know what failed governance looks like. I've investigated both. And Governor Newsom represents the single most comprehensive example of failed governance in modern American history. He paused, letting that statement sink in, his eyes still locked on the camera. Tonight I'm going to present evidence. Not spin, not talking points. Evidence. FBI data, crime statistics, business closure numbers, financial waste, policy disasters, personal hypocrisy. I'm going to show you, with facts that cannot be denied, how Gavin Newsom took the Golden State and turned it into a cautionary tale. By the end of this debate, you'll understand exactly why 500,000 people fled California. You'll know why businesses are leaving. You'll see why crime exploded. You'll learn why the streets are covered in tents and human waste. You'll discover why the power grid fails every summer. And you'll understand why this man, despite his perfect hair and expensive suit, should never, ever be trusted with more power than he already has. He closed his folder, his expression grim, determined. Governor Newsom inherited paradise and created exodus. Let's discuss why. The studio went absolutely silent. Newsom's practiced smile had vanished, replaced by something that looked almost like concern. Bayer looked like he'd realized this wasn't going to be a typical political debate. And across America, millions of people leaned forward, sensing they were about to witness something extraordinary. Bongino didn't wait for Bayer to transition to the first question. He immediately pulled out a thick stack of documents, U-Haul pricing data printed on official letterhead, and held it up like evidence in a courtroom. Governor, before we get into policy details, let's start with the most obvious question. If California is so successful, if your governance is so effective, why are people leaving in record numbers? Not a few people. Not some people. Over 500,000 people in 3 years. That's the entire population of Atlanta. Gone. He spread out the migration data across the desk, each page marked with highlighter annotations, official government seals. This isn't my opinion. This is Census Bureau data, IRS migration data, U-Haul rental statistics, Federal Reserve economic analysis. Every source, every methodology, every measurement shows the same thing: massive population exodus from California to red states. Newsom tried to interject, his voice taking on that slightly condescending tone politicians use when they think they're being patient with someone who doesn't understand complexity. Well, Dan, migration is a complex phenomenon with many factors. Housing costs in California have risen because of our success, because people want to live here, because demand exceeds supply. Some people choose to relocate for various personal reasons. No. Bongino's voice cut through like a blade. Don't do that. Don't give me political spin. I'm an investigator. I deal in evidence. Let me show you what's actually happening. He pulled out a color-coded map of the United States, thick red arrows flowing out of California like blood from a wound. These arrows represent net migration. Every arrow shows more people leaving than arriving. Where are they going? Texas, Florida, Tennessee, Arizona, Nevada, Idaho, Montana. What do these states have in common, Governor? They're run by Republicans. They have lower taxes. They enforce laws. They don't enable street camping and open-air drug markets. Bongino pulled out comparative tax rate charts, cost of living analyses, crime statistics, all official documents, all sourced, all irrefutable. Let's break down why people are fleeing. Housing cost. Median home price in California, $850,000. In Texas, $300,000. In Florida, $400,000. A comparable house in California costs 3 times what it costs in states people are fleeing to. That's not market forces. That's regulatory dysfunction. You've made it impossible for working families to own homes. He showed income tax comparisons. California income tax up to 13.3%, highest in the nation. Texas income tax 0. Florida income tax 0. Tennessee income tax on wages 0. You're taking 13% of people's income, and what are they getting for it? Streets covered in tents. Schools that rank near the bottom despite highest per-student spending. Rolling blackouts. Crime waves. Newsom was shaking his head, trying to maintain composure, but Bongino could see the cracks forming. The governor wasn't used to being confronted with raw data by someone who knew how to present evidence. This wasn't a friendly CNN interview. Bongino pulled out U-Haul pricing data, his favorite piece of evidence because it was so simple, so clear, so impossible to spin. Here's my favorite metric, Governor. U-Haul one-way rental. San Francisco to Dallas, $2,400. Dallas to San Francisco, $800. That's a 3-to-1 ratio. Why? Because U-Haul can't keep trucks in California. Everyone's renting them to escape. Nobody's renting them to move in. Supply and demand. Basic economics. Your state has such high demand for escape vehicles that U-Haul charges premium prices just to move the trucks back. He looked directly at Newsom, his expression deadly serious. As a criminal investigator, when I see mass exodus from a location, I ask why. Usually it's danger, war, crime, economic collapse, natural disaster. California has none of those excuses. You have perfect weather. Pacific coastline, natural resources, technology industry, agriculture, ports. You have every blessing a state could want, and people are still fleeing. That means one thing: government failure, your failure. Newsom tried to regain control, his voice rising slightly, a hint of frustration creeping in. California's population is over 39 million people. Migration patterns fluctuate. We've had periods of growth and periods of adjustment. The pandemic disrupted everything. People wanted more space. Remote work enabled relocation. This isn't about my policies. It's about changing American lifestyle preferences. Wrong. Bongino pulled out timeline analysis, showing exactly when the exodus accelerated. The pandemic started in 2020. Migration increased during your COVID lockdowns, the strictest in America. But it didn't stop when the pandemic ended. It accelerated. 2021, massive exodus. 2022, continued exodus. 2023, ongoing exodus. This isn't pandemic adjustment. This is people experiencing California governance and choosing to leave. He showed business relocation data, pages and pages of corporate headquarters leaving California. Tesla headquarters moved to Texas. Oracle moved to Texas. Hewlett-Packard moved to Texas. Charles Schwab moved to Texas. CBRE Group moved to Texas. McKesson moved to Texas. These aren't small businesses, Governor. These are Fortune 500 companies with thousands of employees, billions in economic impact. They left California and explicitly cited taxes, regulations, and quality of life concerns. Bongino pulled out CEO statements, actual quotes from corporate press releases explaining their departures. Elon Musk said California had become complacent about its success. Larry Ellison cited regulatory burden. These executives, running multi-billion-dollar companies, looked at California and said, "No, thank you. We're leaving." If the smartest business minds in America are fleeing your state, that's a pretty clear signal. Newsom was visibly uncomfortable now, shifting in his seat, his perfect hair somehow looking slightly less perfect under the studio lights. California still has more Fortune 500 headquarters than any other state. We still have the venture capital. We still have the innovation economy. We're still the fifth largest economy in the world. And you're still losing population, Bongino fired back. That economy you keep bragging about, it's shrinking as a percentage of national GDP. It's not growing as fast as Texas or Florida. You inherited all those advantages and you're squandering them. You're the kid who inherited a successful family business and is running it into the ground while bragging about how big the company used to be. He gathered his migration evidence, stacking it neatly. Governor Newsom, the exodus from California is the most damning indictment of your governance. People vote with their feet. They're voting against you. Over 500,000 in 3 years. That's not a fluctuation. That's not pandemic adjustment. That's a referendum. Your policies made California unaffordable, unsafe, and unlivable for working families. And the exodus proves it. Bongino looked at the camera again, speaking directly to viewers. If you're watching this and you know someone who left California, you know I'm right. They didn't leave because of the weather. They didn't leave because they suddenly decided they preferred Texas dust storms to California beaches. They left because Gavin Newsom's policies made staying impossible. High taxes, high crime, high housing costs, low quality of life. They left because of him. He turned back to Newsom. Great California exodus is your legacy, Governor, and it's just getting started. Bayer tried to move to the next topic, but Bongino wasn't finished. He pulled out his phone, and what he displayed on the screen behind them made several audience members audibly gasp. Photographs of San Francisco streets, tents lining entire blocks, needles scattered on sidewalks, human feces visible on concrete. It looked like a war zone, like a third-world shantytown, not a major American city. Governor, let's talk about what you've done to California's cities. These photographs were taken last week by FBI agents conducting an investigation in San Francisco. I've protected presidents in developing countries with better sanitation than this. Let's discuss how you turned San Francisco, once called the Paris of the West, into an open-air drug market and homeless encampment. He displayed statistics that seemed almost impossible to believe. California has approximately 181,000 homeless people. That's 30% of the entire nation's homeless population. Your state has 12% of America's population, but 30% of its homeless. Let that sink in. You have 2.5 times more homeless per capita than the national average. Newsom tried to respond, his voice taking on that compassionate tone politicians use when discussing homelessness. Homelessness is a national crisis that requires comprehensive solutions. California has invested billions in housing, services, and support. We're addressing root causes like mental health and addiction. We're building supportive housing. This is complex. Bongino exploded. Complex. You spend $60,000 per homeless person per year and the problem gets worse. $60,000. That's more than the median household income in multiple states. If you just gave each homeless person the $60,000 in cash, they could rent an apartment. But you don't solve homelessness. You fund a homelessness industry. He pulled out nonprofit tax returns, budget documents, financial audits, spreading them across the desk like a prosecutor presenting evidence of fraud. Let me show you where the money goes. Homelessness nonprofits with executives making $250,000 salaries. Consulting firms getting $10 million contracts to study the problem. Service providers billing the government hundreds per person per night for shelter beds. It's a racket, Governor. You've created an entire industry that profits from homelessness, and solving the problem would put them out of business. Bongino showed trend analysis, simple line graphs that told a devastating story. Here's the pattern: more spending, more homelessness. You've spent tens of billions over the past decade. Homelessness has increased every single year. That's not compassion failing. That's a scam. You're enriching people who profit from homelessness while actual homeless people remain on the streets in tents, shooting up drugs, dying. He pulled out policy timelines, showing exactly which decisions led to the current crisis. Proposition 47, which you supported, reduced drug possession from felony to misdemeanor. Result: more addicts on streets because there's no consequences. Ninth Circuit Court ruling, which you didn't fight, that cities can't clear encampments without providing housing. Result: tent cities everywhere because you can't enforce basic standards. Defunding police, which you supported in 2020. Result: no enforcement of quality of life laws, so streets became open-air drug markets. Bongino showed photographs of specific locations over time. Here's United Nations Plaza in San Francisco. 2015, before your policies, relatively clean, functional public space. 2023, Tent City, Needles, human waste, completely unusable. Here's Venice Beach in Los Angeles. 2015, tourist destination. 2023, massive encampment, businesses closed, tourists avoiding it. This is what your policies create. He pulled out business closure data from San Francisco specifically. Walgreens closed 17 stores in San Francisco alone, not because of pandemic, because of theft and safety concerns. Employees were being assaulted. Customers were afraid. Shoplifting was so rampant that basic items had to be locked behind glass. CVS closed multiple stores. Target reduced hours, locked up merchandise. These are major chains with resources, and even they can't operate in the environment you've created. Newsom was getting defensive now, his voice rising. Those are business decisions based on multiple factors. Retail theft is a national problem, not unique to California. We're working on solutions. Bongino's voice dripped with contempt. You've been governor for how many years? The problem has gotten exponentially worse under your watch. You're not working on solutions. You're enabling the problem. Let me explain how this works, Governor, since you seem confused. He stood up, pacing, his prosecutor instincts taking over. When you reduce penalties for theft, you get more theft. When you decriminalize drug possession, you get more drug use. When you stop enforcing laws against public camping, you get more tent cities. When you defund police, you get less enforcement. These aren't complex policy questions. This is basic cause and effect. A child could understand it, but you either can't understand it or you don't care. He showed comparative data from other states. Florida's homeless population, 28,000. Texas, 28,000. These are large states with good weather just like California, but their homeless rates are a fraction of yours. Why? Because they enforce laws, because they require treatment for addiction, because they don't enable street camping, because they solve problems instead of managing them for political advantage. Bongino pulled out the most damning evidence yet, the San Francisco Poop Map, an actual smartphone application that maps human feces locations so pedestrians can avoid them. This exists, Governor. The San Francisco Poop Map, an app that maps human feces so people can navigate around human waste on their way to work. That's not a modern city. That's medieval. That's third world. That's what you've created. He pulled out public health reports documenting disease outbreaks linked to unsanitary street conditions. Hepatitis A outbreaks, typhus, diseases we'd essentially eradicated in America, coming back because your cities have medieval sanitation. The CDC has had to issue warnings about disease risks in San Francisco and Los Angeles. Think about that. The Centers for Disease Control warning Americans about disease risks in California cities. That's banana republic stuff. Newsom tried to regain footing. We've increased funding for cleanup crews, expanded services, built thousands of housing units. The problem is complex and requires sustained effort. You've had sustained effort, Bongino shot back. sustained failure. Let me tell you what the real problem is. You don't want to solve homelessness. You want to manage it. Because solving it would require enforcing laws, requiring treatment, clearing encampments, saying no to the advocacy groups that fund your campaigns. Actually solving homelessness would upset your political base. So you spend billions, enrich nonprofits, virtue signal about compassion, and let real people suffer on the streets. That's not leadership. That's moral cowardice disguised as progressive policy. He gathered all the homelessness evidence, hundreds of pages of documentation. California has 30% of America's homeless. You spend more per homeless person than almost anywhere else. The problem keeps getting worse. Your major cities look like third world countries. There's a smartphone app to avoid human feces. And you want America to trust you with more power. You can't manage San Francisco sidewalks, but you think you should be president. Bongino looked at the camera, his expression grim. If you live in California, you know this is real. If you've visited California cities recently, you've seen it. The homeless crisis isn't a natural disaster. It's a policy disaster created by Governor Newsom and politicians exactly like him. They created the problem. They profit from it politically. And they have absolutely no intention of fixing it. The room was silent except for the hum of equipment. Newsom looked like he'd been punched in the gut. His polished presentation had been shredded by a former cop with evidence. And Bongino was just getting started. He pulled out FBI crime statistics, and his expression suggested this was the part he'd been looking forward to. This was his expertise, law enforcement, crime analysis, and he had the resources of the FBI to back up every single claim. Governor Newsom, I've studied crime my entire adult life. NYPD, Secret Service. FBI, I know what causes crime, I know what prevents crime, and I know what happens when you elect soft-on-crime politicians. Let me show you what soft-on-crime looks like in practice, using California as the case study. He displayed Proposition 47 on the screen, the full text of the ballot measure that changed California's criminal justice system. November 2014. California voters passed Proposition 47, which you supported, which you campaigned for. This proposition reclassified certain theft and drug crimes from felonies to misdemeanors. Specifically, theft of property valued under $950 became a misdemeanor instead of a felony. The stated goal was to reduce prison overcrowding. The actual result was to essentially legalize shoplifting. Bongino showed surveillance footage of organized retail theft, criminals casually filling bags with merchandise and walking out. Here's how it works in practice. Criminal walks into a drugstore, fills a garbage bag with merchandise totaling $949, walks out. Store employees are instructed not to intervene because of liability. If police are called, which is rare because stores have learned it's pointless, the thief gets a misdemeanor citation. No arrest, no jail, maybe a ticket, probably nothing. So the same criminal hits 5 stores that day, 7 stores the next day. It's consequence-free theft up to $950 per incident. He pulled out retail loss data from major chains. Walgreens lost an estimated $25 million per year to theft in San Francisco alone, not across California, just San Francisco. They closed 17 stores as a direct result. CVS, similar losses, multiple store closures. Target had to put basic items, toothpaste, deodorant, shampoo behind locked glass cases. You need an employee with a key to buy toothpaste in California because of Proposition 47. Bongino showed videos of flash mob robberies, coordinated groups storming stores. This is organized retail crime, Governor. These aren't desperate people stealing food to feed their families. These are professional criminal enterprises. 2030, sometimes 50 people storm a Nordstrom, a Louis Vuitton, a jewelry store. They grab everything they can carry. They run. It's coordinated on social media, and it's consequence-free because of your policies. He displayed arrest and prosecution data. Even when these criminals are caught, which is rare, prosecution rates are abysmal. Progressive district attorneys you support, Chesa Boudin in San Francisco before he was recalled, George Gaskin in Los Angeles, they don't prosecute these crimes aggressively. They cite Proposition 47, cite criminal justice reform, cite systemic racism, and let criminals go. So criminals keep committing crimes. Newsom tried to defend the policy. Proposition 47 was about addressing mass incarceration, about treating drug addiction as a health issue rather than a criminal issue, about focusing resources on violent crime. And how'd that work out? Bongino's voice was sharp. Let's look at the data. Theft increased significantly after Proposition 47. Property crime rates diverged from national trends, California getting worse while other states improved. Businesses closed. Retail deserts emerged in poor neighborhoods where people need stores most. And violent crime. Let's talk about Proposition 57. He pulled out another ballot measure, another policy disaster. November 2016. Proposition 57, the Public Safety and Rehabilitation Act. Sounds wonderful. What did it actually do? It allowed early release for prisoners classified as nonviolent offenders, and it changed the definition of nonviolent to include some of the most violent crimes imaginable. Bongino showed the list of crimes reclassified as nonviolent under Proposition 57. Assault with a deadly weapon, nonviolent under Prop 57. Battery causing serious bodily injury, nonviolent. Human trafficking of a child, nonviolent. Domestic violence, nonviolent. Rape of an unconscious person, nonviolent. You took violent criminals and called them nonviolent so you could release them early. That's not criminal justice reform. That's Orwellian language manipulation to free dangerous people. He displayed recidivism data tracking prisoners released under Proposition 57. Here's what happened. You released these nonviolent violent offenders early. Many of them immediately committed new crimes. Assaults increased. Sexual assaults increased. The FBI tracks this data, Governor. I have it right here. You can draw a direct line from Proposition 57 implementation to increases in violent crime. You caused this. Your policy directly led to victimization of innocent people. Bongino pulled out specific case examples, real victims, real crimes. Let me tell you about Maria Gonzalez in Oakland. Assaulted in a parking garage by a man released early under Proposition 57. He'd been convicted of assault with a deadly weapon, classified as nonviolent, released early, immediately committed another violent assault. Maria was hospitalized. Permanent injuries. That's on you, Governor. He showed more cases. Jennifer Chen in Los Angeles, robbed at gunpoint by a repeat offender with 15 prior arrests, released every time under Proposition 47 rules. Robert Williams in Sacramento, carjacked at a red light by someone who should have been in prison but was released under Proposition 57. These are real people victimized because of your policies. Newsom was shaking his head. You're cherry-picking cases. Crime is complicated. There are multiple factors. No, Bongino cut him off. I'm presenting evidence. This is what FBI investigators do. We look at policy implementation and outcome. Proposition 47 implemented, theft increased. Proposition 57 implemented, violent crime increased. That's not cherry-picking. That's causation. He pulled out comparative state data. Let's look at states that didn't implement California's soft on crime policies. Florida, crime decreased over the same period. Texas, crime decreased. They prosecuted criminals. They kept dangerous people in prison. They enforced laws, and their crime rates improved while yours deteriorated. That's the experiment, Governor. California tried your way. Red states tried the traditional way. Your way led to more crime. Their way led to less crime. Results are in. You lost. Bongino showed the defund the police movement data, the ultimate catastrophe. Then came 2020, George Floyd, Black Lives Matter protests, and the absolute insanity of defunding police. You supported it. Los Angeles cut lapped budget by $150 million. San Francisco cut police funding. Oakland cut police funding. San Jose cut funding. Every major California city followed the same pattern. Cut police budgets. Reduce police presence. Stop proactive policing. And what happened? He displayed the predictable results. Violent crime increased. Response times doubled or tripled because there weren't enough officers. Carjackings in Oakland reached epidemic levels. Follow-home robberies in Los Angeles became common. Organized retail theft exploded. Asian American seniors were attacked in San Francisco with disturbing frequency. Crime victims waited hours for police response. Officers quit in droves because they weren't supported. weren't backed up by politicians, were prosecuted for doing their jobs. Bongino pulled out officer exodus data. California law enforcement officers leaving in record numbers, going to other states, going to agencies that support them, retiring early, choosing other careers. You defunded them, you demonized them, you prosecuted them, and then you wondered why they left. And when they left, crime got worse. Shocking. He showed FBI Uniform Crime Report data, the official national statistics. These are federal statistics, Governor, not subject to California's creative accounting. California's violent crime rate increased significantly while the national rate decreased. Property crime in California increased dramatically while most other states saw decreases. California is an outlier, and you're the reason. Your policies, your soft on crime approach, your defund the police support, your progressive prosecutors, you created a crime wave. Newsom tried to push back. Crime has been decreasing in some categories. Some communities have seen improvements. We're investing in community-based solutions because businesses stopped reporting. Bongino's voice rose. When Walgreens gets robbed for the 10th time that week and police don't come, don't make arrests, don't prosecute, they stop reporting. When prosecutors won't file charges, victims stop reporting. Your crime statistics are lies because you've made reporting pointless. Real crime is far worse than your numbers show. He gathered all the crime evidence, a massive pile of documentation. Governor Newsom, you supported Proposition 47, making theft consequence-free. You supported Proposition 57, releasing violent offenders. You supported defunding police. You support progressive prosecutors who won't prosecute. Every single policy decision increased crime. This isn't theoretical. I have FBI data proving it. California's crime wave is your creation. Stores are closing. People are afraid. Victims are suffering. And you're still pretending you care about public safety. Bongino looked directly at the camera. Law enforcement professionals know what works. Enforce laws, prosecute crimes, keep dangerous people in prison, support police. It's not complicated. California under Gavin Newsom does the opposite. Ignore laws, release criminals, defund police. Don't prosecute. The result is exactly what every cop in America predicted: crime everywhere. If you're a crime victim in California, know this. Gavin Newsom's policies created the environment that allowed your victimization. The room felt heavy with the weight of evidence. Newsom looked genuinely rattled now. This wasn't spin he could counter. These were FBI statistics, federal data, irrefutable evidence presented by someone who knew exactly how to build a case. Bongino's expression changed. The anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface, but now there was something else. Something personal. This next part wasn't about statistics. It was about character, about hypocrisy, about the moment Gavin Newsom revealed exactly who he really was. Governor, let's talk about November 6, 2020. Do you remember that date? Do you remember where you were that evening? Let me refresh your memory. You were at the French Laundry, one of the most exclusive and expensive restaurants in California, having dinner. Let's discuss what that dinner revealed about your character, about your hypocrisy, about your absolute contempt for the people you govern. He pulled out photographs from that infamous dinner, leaked images that had sparked outrage across California. There you are, Governor, sitting indoors at a long table with multiple households, no masks, no social distancing, having a grand time. This was November 2020. Let me remind everyone what was happening in California. In November 2020, Bongino displayed California's COVID restrictions from that exact time period. Your orders: no indoor dining in most California counties. Restaurants were forced to close indoor seating or operate at severely reduced capacity. Your orders: gatherings limited to no more than 3 households. You were at a dinner with representatives from at least 8 households. Your orders: wear masks at all times except when actively eating. Nobody at your table was wearing masks. Your orders: maintain 6 feet social distancing. Your table, people sitting shoulder to shoulder. You violated every single rule you'd imposed on Californians, every single one. He showed the guest list, reading names slowly, deliberately. Jason Kinney, lobbyist, the birthday boy this dinner was celebrating. Members of the California Medical Association, the group representing doctors who were publicly supporting your lockdown policies. Think about that. The medical association lobbying for strict COVID rules was partying with you while those rules were in effect. The irony is so thick you could cut it with a knife. Bongino pulled out the restaurant bill, pricing data from the French Laundry. Cost of this dinner, estimated at $15,000 based on the French Laundry's menu prices. Wine bottles at $350 to $800 each. Multi-course tasting menu at $450 per person. This wasn't a quick meal, Governor. This was a multi-hour, multi-course feast. You were sipping $800 wine while Californians were locked in their homes, unable to visit dying relatives in hospitals, unable to attend funerals, unable to gather for Thanksgiving. He displayed data showing what ordinary Californians were experiencing that same week. Small businesses forced closed, many permanently. Restaurants shut down entirely, owners losing life savings. Children kept out of school, falling behind educationally. Families unable to gather for holidays. People arrested for violating your stay-at-home orders. And you, at a $15,000 dinner party indoors unmasked with lobbyists. Bongino showed the timeline of Newsom's response to getting caught. November 6th, you have the dinner. November 9th, photos leak. Someone at the restaurant, appalled by what they witnessed, took photos and sent them to the media. November 13th, 7 days later, you finally apologize. You called it a bad mistake, said you should have modeled better behavior. But here's what you didn't do. You didn't end the lockdowns. You didn't ease restrictions. You kept every single rule in place for everyone else. You just apologized for being caught violating your own rules. He pulled out small business closure data from that period. While you were enjoying your French Laundry feast, California small businesses were dying. 30% of small businesses closed permanently during your lockdowns. 30%. Restaurants, bars, gyms, salons, retail shops gone forever. Owners who'd spent decades building businesses, who'd employed people, who'd served communities, lost everything. Some committed suicide. Their lives destroyed while you partied with lobbyists. Bongino's voice got harder, more intense. I protected presidents, Governor. I know what security protocols look like for high-level officials. You could have had this dinner at the governor's mansion with proper security. You could have done it outdoors. You could have limited it to 3 households, following your own rules. You could have worn masks. You could have done any number of things that would have at least shown you believed in your own restrictions. Instead, you went to one of California's most expensive, most exclusive restaurants indoors with a large group, violating every rule. That tells me you never believed COVID was as dangerous as you claimed. He showed more examples of elite COVID hypocrisy from California. Nancy Pelosi, hair salon indoors, no mask, while salons were ordered closed. London Breed, San Francisco mayor, fancy restaurant, after imposing strict dining restrictions. California health officials, multiple violations of their own guidelines. The pattern was clear. The people making rules didn't follow them. Rules for thee but not for me. That's tyranny, that's aristocracy. That's exactly what America was founded to reject. Newsom was trying to look contrite. I apologized for that mistake repeatedly. It was bad judgment. It was a lapse. I should have set a better example. It wasn't a lapse, Bongino exploded. It was revealing. It revealed that you never believed in your own lockdowns. If you truly thought COVID was so dangerous that Californians needed to stay home, avoid family, close businesses, you wouldn't have risked a multi-hour indoor dinner party. The truth is you knew the risk was minimal for healthy people like you with access to the best health care. But you kept Californians locked down anyway. You destroyed their businesses, their mental health, their children's education, while you enjoyed life. He gathered the French Laundry evidence, photographs, receipts, policy documents. Governor Newsom, this incident encapsulates everything wrong with your leadership. You impose rules on others you won't follow yourself. You live by a different standard. You enjoy privilege while demanding sacrifice from everyone else. The French Laundry dinner proved you're an elitist hypocrite who believes rules are for the little people, not for Gavin Newsom. Bongino looked at the camera, speaking directly to viewers who'd suffered through lockdowns. Everyone who lost a business during COVID lockdowns, everyone who couldn't visit dying relatives in hospitals, everyone who missed funerals, everyone whose children fell behind in school, everyone who suffered isolation and depression, this is for you. Gavin Newsom didn't believe in the lockdowns. He just believed in controlling you. The French Laundry proved it. He never thought the rules should apply to him, just to you. Remember that. Always remember that. The silence in the studio was absolute. Newsom looked like he wanted to disappear. The French Laundry incident had been a massive scandal in California, but hearing it presented this way, with all the context, all the contrasts, all the evidence of hypocrisy, it was devastating. And Bongino had more, so much more. He pulled out what appeared to be an engineering feasibility study, hundreds of pages thick, and dropped it on the desk with a thud that echoed through the studio. Governor, let's talk about California's high-speed rail project. This report is the latest cost estimate and timeline analysis. Want to know what it says? After 16 years and $128 billion spent, you've built 0 miles of functioning high-speed rail. 0. Let me repeat that. 16 years. $128 billion. 0 operational miles. Let's discuss this monument to government incompetence. He displayed the original ballot proposition from 2008, Proposition 1A, that California voters approved. Here's what voters were promised. High-speed train from San Francisco to Los Angeles. Travel time 2 hours 40 minutes. Total cost $33 billion. Completion date 2020. That was the promise. That's what Californians voted for. Let's see what they actually got. Bongino showed current project status, official documents from the California High-Speed Rail Authority. Current cost estimate, $128 billion, nearly 4 times the original estimate. Current completion date, unknown. Seriously, they won't even project a completion date anymore because everyone knows it's decades away, if ever. Miles of functioning high-speed rail, 0. Not 1 mile. Not 1 station. Not 1 operational segment. Nothing. He pulled out construction photographs showing rail segments in the Central Valley, empty tracks running through farmland. They've built approximately 119 miles of track segments in the Central Valley. Segments, disconnected pieces, not electrified, not signaled, not operational, can't carry trains, can't carry passengers, just expensive tracks sitting in fields going nowhere, connecting nothing. Billions of dollars for track that doesn't function as a railroad. Bongino displayed route maps showing the evolution of the project. Original plan, San Francisco to Los Angeles, makes perfect sense. 2 major cities, huge population centers, massive demand, that's a route worth building. Current plan may be Bakersfield to Merced. Let me repeat that. Bakersfield to Merced. Nobody, and I mean nobody, wants a high-speed train from Bakersfield to Merced. There isn't demand for that route. It doesn't serve major population centers. It's literally the least useful segment of the original plan. But that's all you might actually complete after spending $128 billion. He showed cost per mile calculations, comparing California to international projects. Let's do basic math, Governor. $128 billion divided by the proposed 520 miles equals $256 million per mile. Spain builds high-speed rail for $25 million per mile. France, similar costs. Japan, slightly higher but still a fraction of California's costs. You're spending 10 times what efficient countries spend. Why? Incompetence, corruption, regulatory dysfunction, environmental review paralysis. Union work rules that make construction impossibly expensive. Every dysfunction of California government concentrated in one project. Bongino pulled out consultant spending records. Want to know where the money goes? Consultants. Armies of consultants. Billions, not millions, billions spent on studies, reports, environmental reviews, feasibility analyses, public relations, legal fees. An entire industry of consultants getting rich producing documents while not 1 operational mile of track gets built. As FBI Deputy Director, when I see billions of dollars spent with nothing delivered, that triggers fraud investigation protocols. This smells like fraud. He showed the cascade of lawsuits and regulatory obstacles that have paralyzed the project. Why has this taken 16 years with 0 results? Lawsuits. Environmental groups suing over endangered species. Farmers suing over land acquisition. Local governments suing over route selection. Water agencies suing over water rights. Every single decision gets litigated for years. And who files these lawsuits? Environmental groups, advocacy organizations, many of which support Democrats. many of which support you, Governor. You created a regulatory state that makes building infrastructure impossible, and then you wonder why nothing gets built. Bongino compared California to other countries, showing high-speed rail networks across Europe and Asia. China has built 40,000 kilometers of high-speed rail in 15 years. 40,000 kilometers. France has had high-speed rail since 1981. Spain has an extensive network. Japan has been running bullet trains since 1964. 60 years ago, Japan built high-speed rail. California, the richest state in the richest country in human history in 16 years, has built 0 operational miles. That's not a technology problem. That's a government failure problem. He pulled out opportunity cost analysis. Let's talk about what $128 billion could have bought. You could have completely rebuilt every public school in California. You could have fixed every road, every bridge, every piece of crumbling infrastructure. You could have built water storage to solve drought issues forever. You could have upgraded the electrical grid to actually work. You could have done literally anything useful. Instead, you spent it on 0 miles of train. Bongino showed Newsom's own statements defending and promoting the project over the years. You've consistently supported this disaster. You could cancel it, admit failure, cut losses, redirect the money to something useful. But you won't. Because canceling would mean admitting government can't deliver what it promises. It would mean admitting this progressive megaproject was a fantasy. So you keep throwing money at it, keep pretending it's viable, keep insisting you're making progress, while everyone with eyes can see you've accomplished nothing. Newsom tried to defend it. High-speed rail is important for California's future. It's a long-term infrastructure investment. These projects take time. The challenges are significant, but we're committed to completing it. You've completed nothing, Bongino shouted. 16 years. $128 billion. 0 operational miles. That's not progress. That's fraud. That's taking taxpayers' money under false pretenses. You promised a train from San Francisco to Los Angeles by 2020 for $33 billion. It's 2024. You've spent $128 billion. And you have track segments in Bakersfield going nowhere. That's not taking time. That's never going to happen. He gathered all the high-speed rail documentation. This project will never be completed. Everyone knows it. The engineers know it. The consultants know it. The legislators know it. You know it. But admitting it would be politically embarrassing, so you keep the charade going, keep spending billions every year on a train that will never carry passengers. That's not leadership. That's sunk cost fallacy with other people's money. Bongino looked at the camera. California taxpayers, you've spent $128 billion on 0 miles of high-speed rail. Think about that. $128 billion for nothing. You could have taken that money, given every California resident $3,200 in cash, and they could have driven themselves wherever they wanted to go for decades. Instead, Gavin Newsom spent it on a train to nowhere. Remember that when he asks for more money for more grand projects. Evidence was overwhelming. The most expensive infrastructure project in American history had produced exactly nothing under Newsom's governance. It was a perfect metaphor for California under his leadership. Grand promises, massive spending, 0 results. Bongino pulled out economic damage assessments that looked like disaster reports, because that's exactly what they were. California's COVID lockdown policies had been an economic disaster, and he was about to itemize every cost. Governor, let's calculate the full cost of your COVID lockdowns. Not just in dollars, though those numbers are staggering. Let's count destroyed businesses, shattered lives, damaged children, devastated mental health. Let's total the wreckage you caused by locking down California harder and longer than virtually any other state in America. He showed lockdown duration timelines comparing states. California lockdowns began March 2020, continued with varying intensity through 2021, and extended into 2022. Some of the longest school closures in the nation, 18 months in many districts. Some of the strictest business restrictions. Some of the most aggressive enforcement. You kept California locked down long after evidence showed the policies weren't working, long after other states safely reopened. Why? Bongino displayed business closure statistics, small business death certificates. 30% of California small businesses closed permanently during your lockdowns. 30%. These weren't temporary closures. These were permanent failures. Restaurants that had operated for generations, gone. Gyms where people built health and community, gone. Salons where women had been going for decades, gone. Retail shops, service businesses, entire commercial districts destroyed forever. He showed specific examples, real businesses with names and faces. Maria's family restaurant in Oakland, operated for 42 years, closed permanently. Johnson's Hardware in Sacramento, family-owned since 1965, gone. Fitness Plus Gym in San Diego, 12 locations, all closed, 300 jobs lost. These aren't statistics, Governor. These are real people's life work destroyed by your policies. Bongino pulled out unemployment data. California unemployment peaked at over 15%. Millions of people lost jobs. Many never got them back because their employers closed permanently. Lives were destroyed, careers ended, retirement savings depleted. And for what? Let's look at outcomes compared to states that reopened earlier. He displayed comparative COVID outcome data, the numbers that destroyed the entire lockdown narrative. Florida reopened May 2020. Schools reopened fall 2020. Businesses reopened. Life went back to normal while California stayed locked down for another year. Florida's per capita COVID outcomes, virtually identical to California's. Texas reopened similarly early. Per capita outcomes, virtually identical to California's. You kept California locked down for 18 months longer than Florida and got the exact same health results. You destroyed California's economy for nothing. Bongino showed school closure data, educational devastation. California children out of school for 18 months in many districts. Learning loss catastrophic, especially for poor and minority students. Reading scores dropped significantly. Math scores worse. The educational damage will take a generation to repair. Social development delayed. Mental health crisis among teenagers. Meanwhile, Florida kids back in school fall 2020. Learning minimally interrupted. Outcomes better. Your lockdowns didn't protect children. They damaged them. He pulled out mental health crisis data. Suicides increased during lockdowns. Depression and anxiety diagnoses skyrocketed, especially among young people. Domestic violence reports increased. Child abuse harder to detect with kids not in school. Substance abuse increased. Social isolation caused massive psychological damage to vulnerable populations. These are health costs of lockdowns you never considered, never measured, never cared about. Bongino showed the economic favoritism embedded in lockdown policies. Here's the hypocrisy, Governor. Walmart stayed open, Target stayed open, Costco stayed open. Amazon thrived. Big box stores, major corporations, they continued operating throughout lockdowns, but small businesses closed. Restaurants with outdoor seating closed. Gyms with safety protocols closed. You protected big corporations while destroying small businesses. The little guy got crushed. The big corporations made record profits. That's not public health policy. That's corporate favoritism. He displayed total economic damage calculations. Hundreds of billions of dollars in economic damage. Millions of jobs lost permanently. Tens of thousands of businesses destroyed forever. Educational damage that will affect an entire generation. Mental health crisis that will take decades to address. And the COVID outcome compared to states that reopened early, the same, identical. You destroyed California's economy for literally nothing. Bongino showed Newsom's own privileged behavior during lockdowns. Meanwhile, your life continued comfortably. French laundry dinner. Your kids in private school that stayed open. Your winery receiving PPP loans while competing businesses struggled. You had access to private testing, private healthcare, financial security. You sacrificed nothing while demanding everything from Californians. Newsom tried to justify the lockdowns. We had to take aggressive action to save lives. The science at the time supported strict measures. We were following public health guidance. The science showed lockdowns didn't work. Bongino cut him off. Sweden, no lockdowns, same outcomes as lockdown countries. Florida opened early, same outcomes as California. Texas opened early, same outcomes. The data is clear. Lockdowns caused massive harm with minimal benefit. But you ignored that data because lockdowns gave you power. Control over people, control over businesses, emergency powers, and you loved it. He gathered all the economic destruction evidence. Governor Newsom, you locked down California longer than necessary, harder than justified, with worse economic outcomes than states that stayed open, and with identical health outcomes. You destroyed 30% of small businesses. You cost millions of people their jobs. You damaged children's education for years. You caused a mental health crisis. And you did it all while your own life continued privileged and protected. That's not leadership. That's tyranny. Bongino looked at viewers. Everyone who lost a business, everyone who lost a job, everyone whose children fell behind, everyone who suffered isolation and depression. Gavin Newsom did this to you. His lockdowns destroyed your livelihood while he dined at the French Laundry. His policies crushed you while he protected himself. Remember that whenever he lectures about caring for people, the lockdown damage was permanent. Businesses wouldn't reopen. Jobs wouldn't return. Lost education couldn't be recovered. And Newsom was responsible for all of it. Bongino pulled out California electrical grid reports, and his expression suggested he was going to enjoy this segment. Energy policy failure was among the easiest to prove because the outcome was binary. Either the lights work or they don't. In California, increasingly, they didn't. Governor, let's talk about electricity. Keeping the lights on. Seems pretty basic, right? Fundamental infrastructure. But California can't do it. Let's discuss why Californians can't run their air conditioning during summer heat waves, can't charge their electric vehicles, and face rolling blackouts in one of the richest states on Earth. He displayed grid failure reports from multiple years. Summer 2020, rolling blackouts. Summer 2021, flex alerts, pleas for people to reduce electricity use. Summer 2022, same warnings, grid nearly failing. Summer 2023, emergency alerts. Every single summer, California's grid approaches collapse. This isn't weather extremes. Other hot states don't have this problem. This is policy failure. Your policy failure. Bongino showed power plant closure data. Natural gas plants shutting down across California. Diablo Canyon nuclear plant, you tried to close it, had to reverse course when you realized you'd have no reliable power. Coal plants closed years ago. What did you replace all this reliable baseload power with? Solar and wind. Intermittent, unreliable, weather-dependent generation. Problem. The sun doesn't shine at night. The wind doesn't always blow. He displayed California's electricity demand curve by hour of day. Look at this graph, Governor. California electricity demand peaks from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. That's when people come home from work, turn on air conditioning, cook dinner, watch TV, charge devices. Peak demand is evening. When does solar power production drop to zero? Around 6 p.m. when the sun sets. Your peak demand coincides perfectly with minimum solar supply. Who could have predicted this? Oh right, every engineer who understands how electricity grids work. Bongino pulled out grid emergency alert records. What's your solution when demand exceeds supply? You tell people not to charge electric vehicles. Don't run dishwashers. Don't do laundry. Set thermostats to 85 degrees in 110-degree heat. Sweat in the dark. That's your solution. That's third world infrastructure. That's what happens in failed states, not in California. He showed the electric vehicle mandate. Meanwhile, you've mandated that by 2035, all new cars sold in California must be electric. Let me understand this. You can't power the current grid, can't keep electricity reliable now, but you're mandating millions of additional electric vehicles that will need charging. Where's the power coming from? You haven't built new power plants. You've closed existing ones. You're replacing reliable power with intermittent renewables, then dramatically increasing demand. The math doesn't work, Governor. It physically cannot work. Bongino displayed California electricity price comparisons. California residential electricity rates among the highest in the nation, 50 to 70% higher than national average. Commercial rates even worse. Industrial users paying premium prices, all while getting unreliable service. You're paying more for less. That's quite an achievement. Only government could make electricity both expensive and unreliable simultaneously. He compared to other states' energy policies. Texas, abundant, reliable power, lower prices. They use natural gas, nuclear, coal, wind, solar, everything. Diversified portfolio with reliable baseload. Result, cheap abundant electricity. Florida, similar approach. Result, reliable power. California, shut down baseload, rely on intermittent renewables. Result, expensive unreliable power that fails every summer. Bongino showed the green virtue signaling hypocrisy. Here's the best part, Governor. California imports massive amounts of electricity from other states. You import coal power from Utah, natural gas power from Arizona, hydroelectric from Oregon and Washington. You burn fossil fuels, just not inside California. You pretend to be green while importing electricity generated by the exact sources you claim to oppose. You're not reducing emissions. You're exporting them and claiming moral superiority. He pulled out manufacturing exodus data. Result of unreliable, expensive electricity. Energy-intensive manufacturing leaves California. Steel manufacturing gone. Chemical production gone. Any industry requiring 24/7 reliable power, leaving for Texas, Arizona, other states with functional grids. More jobs lost. More economic damage. All because you prioritized virtue signaling over reliable infrastructure. Newsom tried to defend his energy policies. We're leading the nation on climate change. Renewable energy is the future. We're making necessary transition to sustainable power. You're leading the nation in blackouts. Bongino exploded. Leading in electricity prices. Leading in grid failures. You can't keep the lights on. You're mandating electric cars while telling people not to charge them. That's not leadership. That's magical thinking. As an engineer would tell you, you can't mandate demand increases while decreasing reliable supply. It's physically impossible. He gathered energy policy documentation. You've shut down reliable power plants without adequate replacement. You mandate intermittent renewables without backup. You can't maintain grid stability during heat waves. You have the highest electricity prices in America. You're forcing electric vehicles while the grid can't handle current demand. Every energy policy has failed. California's grid is failing, and you're making it worse by doubling down on the same failed approach. Bongino addressed viewers directly. Californians, when your power goes out this summer, when you get flex alerts telling you not to charge your car or run your air conditioning in 100-degree heat, remember who caused this. Gavin Newsom's green energy fantasy destroyed your electrical grid. He cares more about climate virtue signaling than keeping your lights on, and it will only get worse. The energy crisis was perfect encapsulation of progressive governance. Prioritize feelings over physics. Mandate outcomes without ensuring supply. Ignore engineering realities. Then blame everyone else when the system fails. Bongino stood, gathering every single piece of evidence he'd methodically presented throughout the debate. This was the final summation, the comprehensive destruction, the complete case against Gavin Newsom's California. Governor Newsom, we've covered extensive ground tonight. Let me summarize your record as governor in detail, because the American people deserve to understand exactly what you've done to California. He started with population exodus, holding up the migration data. First, you've driven over 500,000 people out of California in 3 years. First population decline in state history. These aren't random departures. Middle-class families, young professionals, retirees, business owners, everyone who can leave is leaving. They're fleeing to Texas, Florida, Tennessee, Arizona, states with lower taxes, safer streets, better governance. The Great California Exodus happened entirely under your watch, caused entirely by your policies. Bongino moved to homelessness evidence. Second, 181,000 homeless people in California. 30% of America's homeless population in a state with only 12% of America's population. Tent cities covering entire neighborhoods. Needles on playgrounds. Human feces on sidewalks requiring smartphone apps to navigate around. You spend $60,000 per homeless person annually and the problem accelerates. That's not compassion. That's an industrial fraud enriching nonprofits while people die on streets. He continued to crime. Third, you champion Proposition 47, reducing theft penalties causing organized retail crime explosion, stores closing, businesses fleeing. You supported Proposition 57, releasing violent offenders early by redefining violent crimes as nonviolent. Crime increased. You supported defunding police. Response times tripled. Officer exodus. California's crime rate increased while other states improved. You created a crime wave through policy choices. Bongino picked up French Laundry photographs. Fourth, while locking down California with America's strictest COVID restrictions, you attended $15,000 dinner at French Laundry, indoors, unmasked, violating every rule you'd imposed. You apologized when caught but kept lockdowns in place for everyone else. Perfect encapsulation of elite hypocrisy. Rules for thee, not for me. He moved to high-speed rail disaster. Fifth, 16 years, $128 billion spent on high-speed rail. Operational miles, 0. Not one functional mile of track. Promised San Francisco to Los Angeles by 2020 for $33 billion. Delivered nothing by 2024 for $128 billion. Will never be completed. But you keep funding it because admitting failure would be embarrassing. So billions more wasted annually on train to nowhere. Bongino continued with lockdown economic damage. Sixth, you locked down California longer than necessary, destroying 30% of small businesses permanently. Millions lost jobs. Children kept from school 18 months. Educational damage catastrophic. Mental health crisis. Economic devastation incalculable. Meanwhile, Florida, Texas, states opening earlier had identical health outcomes with fraction of economic damage. You destroyed California's economy for nothing. He showed electrical grid failures. Seventh, you shut down reliable power plants replaced with intermittent renewables without adequate backup. Grid failing every summer, highest electricity prices in nation. Flex alerts telling people not to charge electric cars while you mandate electric cars. Can't keep lights on while dramatically increasing demand. Math doesn't work. Physics doesn't care about your feelings. Grid is failing. Bongino compiled all evidence together. Let me show you the pattern, Governor. Every major policy you've implemented has comprehensively failed. Population declining, homelessness exploding, crime increasing, COVID response tyrannical and economically destructive, high-speed rail $128 billion wasted, small businesses 30% destroyed, electricity unreliable and expensive, education worst outcomes despite highest spending, housing median price over $850,000, taxes highest in America, people fleeing. He looked at Newsom with something approaching pity. Governor, California should be paradise. Perfect weather, Pacific coastline, natural resources, technology industry, agriculture, ports, universities, tourism, entertainment. You inherited every advantage a state could possibly have, and you've turned it into a place people desperately flee. That's not bad luck. That's not pandemic disruption. That's failed leadership. Bongino's voice intensified. I've served this country my entire adult life. NYPD, Secret Service protecting presidents, FBI investigating federal crimes. I've seen failed governance in dangerous places. Gavin Newsom, you represent the epitome of failed American governance. You've had every advantage, every resource, every blessing, and you've squandered it all. You've taken the Golden State and tarnished it beyond recognition. He continued, California under your leadership has become a warning. When states debate policy, they say we don't want to become California. When businesses consider expansion, they explicitly rule out California. When families plan relocations, they leave California. You've transformed California into America's cautionary tale about progressive governance failure. Bongino gathered his evidence. Let's discuss your presidential ambitions. You clearly want to be president. You position yourself as national leader. You seek national spotlight. But your California record is comprehensive failure. Why would anyone make you president so you can do to America what you've done to California? So you can drive Americans out of America like you drove Californians out of California? So you can destroy America's economy like you destroyed California's economy? He looked at the camera, speaking to the American people. Everyone watching, this man wants to be your president. He wants to implement California policies nationwide. Imagine America with California's homelessness crisis. Imagine America with California's crime epidemic. Imagine America with California's taxes, regulations, dysfunction, decay. That's what President Newsom would deliver. That's his record. That's his vision. Bongino turned back to Newsom for final statement. Governor, you represent everything wrong with modern progressive governance. High taxes driving away taxpayers, crushing regulations destroying businesses, soft on crime policies endangering citizens, COVID tyranny destroying freedom, wasteful spending on boondoggles, energy policies defying physics, elite hypocrisy permeating everything, rules for regular people, different rules for you. His final statement was devastating. California is dying under your governance. 500,000 people fled, businesses leaving, crime rampant, streets covered in tents, waste, needles, grid failing every summer, schools failing children despite highest spending, cost of living crushing families, and you're personally responsible. Every policy failure, every destroyed business, every lost job, every crime increase, it's on you, your decisions, your policies, your failures. Bongino pointed at the mountain of evidence. I've presented facts tonight. FBI data, federal statistics, business closure numbers, population exodus data, crime increases, energy grid failures, financial waste documentation, personal hypocrisy proof, all documented, all sourced, all showing identical conclusion. Gavin Newsom has catastrophically failed California. He made his final point. Your hair is perfect, Governor. Your suits are expensive. Your smile is practiced. You look like central casting's idea of a leader. But substance matters more than style. Results matter more than appearance. And your results are terrible, disastrous, catastrophic. California is measurably worse because of you. America would be worse with you as president. The evidence is overwhelming. The case is closed. Gavin Newsom, guilty of destroying the Golden State. The room sat in absolute stunned silence. Newsom looked physically diminished, like he'd been systematically dismantled because he had been. Brett Baer looked shocked, having witnessed something unprecedented. The audience sat motionless, processing the comprehensive destruction they just witnessed. Dan Bongino had accomplished what California media refused to attempt. He'd held Gavin Newsom accountable for every failure, every hypocrisy, every policy disaster, using evidence that couldn't be spun away, couldn't be denied, couldn't be dismissed. The video began spreading across social media before the broadcast even concluded. Within hours, clips were viral. Within days, full debate had hundreds of millions of views. Within a week, it had fundamentally altered American political discourse. Fox News reported their highest-rated broadcast in network history. The 2-hour debate was replayed constantly. Individual segments went viral separately. French Laundry section, 20 million views. High-speed rail section, 18 million views. Crime statistics section, 25 million views. Each devastating independently, comprehensive together. Bongino destroys Newsom trended worldwide for entire week. Not just in America, globally. International media covered it as masterclass in political accountability. Even liberal outlets struggled to defend Newsom. CNN tried, bringing analysts who admitted Bongino's statistics are largely accurate according to public records. MSNBC brought defenders who couldn't explain the exodus, the homelessness, the crime increases, the French Laundry hypocrisy, the high-speed rail disaster. Real impact manifested in California. Within 48 hours, recall Newsom petitions began circulating again. 1 million signatures first week. Unlike previous recall attempt, this had unstoppable momentum because Bongino had documented everything Californians knew but couldn't articulate effectively. Newsom's California approval rating dropped to 36% within 2 weeks. National favorability, crucial for presidential ambitions, collapsed to 27%. The man positioning himself as Democratic presidential candidate watched those hopes evaporate in 2 hours. California businesses accelerated departures. Tesla, already relocated, released statement citing debate as confirmation of decision. Oracle similar statement. Multiple major corporations announced relocations to Texas, Florida, Tennessee, explicitly citing California's governance failures exposed in debate. Texas Governor Greg Abbott launched Don't California My Texas campaign using debate clips. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis did same. Red state governors nationwide used debate as evidence recruiting California businesses and residents. FBI, opened investigations into California high-speed rail spending after Bongino's exposure. Where did $128 billion go with zero operational miles to show? Investigative resources Bongino commanded as deputy director were now focused on California waste and potential fraud. Democratic presidential candidates immediately distanced themselves from Newsom. Nobody wanted association with the man systematically destroyed on national television. His endorsements became toxic overnight. Fundraising evaporated. Presidential ambitions died that night on live television. Perhaps most symbolic moment came 3 weeks post-debate. San Francisco Chronicle, reliably liberal newspaper that had endorsed Newsom repeatedly, ran editorial titled "Time for New Leadership." They cited debate as wake-up call about California failures. When even the Chronicle abandoned him, his support was truly finished. Newsom attempted recovery. Friendly interviews with sympathetic media. But every interviewer, even friendly ones, had to address the debate. Had to ask about Exodus, French Laundry, high-speed rail, crime, homelessness. Bongino had set the agenda permanently. Newsom couldn't escape it. Recall effort gained unstoppable momentum. 3 months post-debate, required signatures obtained to trigger election. Polling showed Newsom losing badly. His governorship, like presidential ambitions, was endangered. California voters, including Democrats, were exhausted by failures. Debate had crystallized everything wrong. They couldn't unsee what Bongino showed them. Their governor was style without substance, hair gel without results, expensive suits and French Laundry dinners while California collapsed. Conservative movement energized nationwide. Bongino proved confronting progressive governance with comprehensive facts works. Document failure systematically. Present evidence professionally. Let facts speak. The argument wins. Law and order messaging resonated. Economic freedom messaging resonated. Government accountability messaging resonated. Bongino himself became conservative hero. Former Secret Service agent turned FBI deputy director who used platform exposing failed governance. His podcast audience increased millions. Book sales skyrocketed. He became face of democratic accountability. The debate became required viewing in political science courses nationwide. Analyzed as masterclass in evidence-based political argumentation. Students studied how Bongino constructed each case, used statistics, connected policy to outcome, documented hypocrisy comprehensively. But for ordinary Americans, especially older voters valuing competence over charisma, substance over style, results over rhetoric, it was simpler. They watched law enforcement professionals systematically destroy slick politicians using nothing but facts. Dan Bongino had lived American success story. Queens, New York upbringing, NYPD service, Secret Service protecting presidents, successful media career built through merit, FBI deputy director appointment earned through competence. Every stage he delivered results, did the work, earned position through performance. Gavin Newsom represented different path. San Francisco elite circles, political connections, governorship presiding over decline, $128 billion on train to nowhere, locked down businesses while partying at French Laundry, 500,000 people fled his state, worst homelessness and crime crisis in California history, only accomplishment perfect hair, debate proved which approach America needs, competence over style, results over rhetoric, accountability over excuses, law enforcement over lawlessness, freedom over tyranny. 2 years post-debate, Newsom was no longer governor. Recall succeeded decisively. Replacement immediately reversed policies, enforced laws, supported police, cut regulations, fixed grid. California began slow, painful recovery. Newsom faded from national politics completely. No presidential run, no vice presidential consideration, no cabinet positions, no political future. He became punchline. Failed governor with perfect hair, destroyed by FBI agent on national television. The Bongino-Newsom debate lived on as proof that facts matter, evidence wins, accountability works.